Hello and welcome to everyone. My name is Felicity Parnham. I'm a Charlton Kings Parish Councillor at the Charlton Kings Parish Council. That's in Cheltenham for anybody who doesn't know it. So tonight, where the talk is going to be about rivers and unfortunately water pollution. And our speaker is Dr. Geoff Sallis. And I'm going to read this, apologies, because it takes some getting into my head. He's co-ordinator of the Warwickshire Avon Pollution Monitoring Project. I think that's probably a bit of a mouthful for anybody. Geoff has a background in the Fire and Rescue Service, and he has completed research with Gloucestershire University and has been working with Friends of the Earth in Tewkesbury for the last 2 years to check pollution levels in the River Avon and to raise awareness of the dangers this brings to our communities. Unfortunately, we're going to hear some grim statistics from Geoff, but he's also going to highlight some of the things that are happening and also, things that maybe can be done. But as you listen, I would ask you to also consider maybe what you think might be able to done and what can be done and what you can take forward. So anyway, over to you, Geoff, and I'll ask some questions at the end.
Okay, so what I'd like to talk about is agricultural pollution, the legislation that's involved in the pollution that we're seeing, the Environment Agency, and an audit committee report from 2022 to show that it's a problem, and understandably right at the highest level. Overview of the water authorities and then sewage discharge before talking about safe haven, and then bringing it home to the Cheltenham area. So farming methods we've used in this country they haven't changed in centuries. They're just about getting nitrates on to stimulate the plant growth. But the problem is that only 40% of the nitrates or the fertilizers being supplied to the plants are actually getting to the roots of the plants. The other 60% are going down into the ground or being washed off directly into our water courses, which as it goes on becomes more and more of a problem. And these fertilizers, just as an aside, actually use up 2% of all the world's energy, which is a phenomenal amount. And we've got to get a grip on this. So when we look at agricultural runoff, agriculture is a major source, and this is identified by most agencies. But it's a diffused water system. It's non-point source, so it's very difficult to identify where it comes from. If it's not direct off the land by the side of the rivers, then it seeps in through the saturated soils into the groundwater and then into the rivers. Currently, there's over 106 farm businesses in this country that are regulated by the EA. And these are regulated by 91 sort of inspectors. So the reality is that a farm business can expect a full inspection about every 230 years, which just begs the question is, why should they comply? Unless we fully fund the Environment Agency, this is going to be very, very difficult to industry to stop pollution. So if we look at the Environment Agency, these are the people that are supposed to be monitoring and policing the pollution in this country. Problem is, since 2011, they've suffered 75% cuts in the budget. And on top of this, they've had a government focus or forced to focus on flood defences. What we've seen that between 2015 and 2021 was a 95% drop in prosecutions. And, where we go from the early side that we were talking about sewage spills in England, about 5,005 sewage spills in 2023, they're not even classed as illegal, because the Environment Agency gives permits. The water companies are quite within their rights to actually allow this happen. So far, we've got the issue of 14% of English rivers achieving good ecological standard, and not one is achieving good chemical status. and prosecutions of water companies have fallen, as I said, from, between 2015 and 2021 by 95%. So if we look at the Environment Audit Committee in January in 2022, they actually said that the government, water companies, and regulators have grown complacent and resigned to the dumping sewage in our rivers. That our rivers and our water spaces are a chemical cocktail of sewage, agricultural waste, plastic, and persistent chemicals in polluting rivers. That an overview of the health of rivers in England and the polluting effects is hampered by outdated, underfunded, and inadequate monitoring. They also said that the presence of persistent chemicals and spread of resistant pathogens in rivers is an issue of grave concern, not just for them, but for everybody. Everybody who cares about their environment, everybody who cares about their river and the water environment. And the public are rightly shocked that they discovered the untreated and partially treated sewage is regularly dumped into rivers and streams. In some cases, the only treatment discharge is to receive that raw sewage is passed through a metal grill before entering the watercourse. Obviously, the Environmental Audit Committee recognised that there's no quick fixes to decades of underinvestment in sewage network. But they think that the government, water companies and regulators have grown complacent and appear resigned to the dumping of sewage in our rivers. An independent analysis of data has produced insight into the performance of the sewage network, which appears to have been beyond the current capacity of the EA to achieve, let alone water companies. It's a strange business when we get volunteers undertaking citizen science can give us an analysis of how bad our our rivers and water authorities are, when we find that the EA, who are supposed to be monitoring this, have just got no idea. So why is this? There's a lot of reasons. In the one sense, people will tell you that we're working on a very old system, but the water and water companies were privatized in '89, and therefore it's an old system that's been in the private sector now for 35 years. And what we're seeing is, after the first 5 years, very little change or very little investment in relation to our foul water systems. But what we are seeing is that bonuses paid to water company executives rose by 20% in 2021, despite failing to meet sewage pollution targets. Figures on average, executives receive 100,000 in one-off payments to top up their salaries, while foul water was being pumped for 2.7 million hours in 2021 into our rivers. The analysis of water company annual reports found that the bonus pools for the 22 water bosses, they actually paid themselves 24.8 million, including 40.7 million in bonuses, benefits, and incentives between 21 and 2022. Since privatisation in '89, shareholders have been paid 72 billion in dividends. Consumers, meanwhile, have actually seen a price rise of 40%. Thames Water received 700,000 as part of a 3 million golden hello pay package in 2021, when the company was found to have illegally discharged untreated sewage on more than 700 days over 2 years. There's a difference in the UK. The average CEO of privatised water companies earns 1.27 million, 2 million, while at Scottish Water Boss, doing the same job, has, from what I feel, is a decent salary of £270,000. But then again, that's still in the public hands. So if we look at it overall, that the number of times raw sewage that has been dumped into the rivers and lakes around the country has risen from 12,600 in 2016 to 582,000 in 2023. And these are figures that are given us from the Environment Agency. The figure also shows that the duration of the spills has vastly increased over the same period. 7 years ago, 100,000 hours worth of spills were recorded. compared to 2023, when it was 4.5 million hours of raw sewage spilling into our rivers. So if we look at that, the water companies are allowed to self-report breaches of released raw sewage in exceptional circumstances. Yet there's no definition of exceptional circumstances. I've asked Severn Trent, I've asked the EA, what makes exceptional circumstances? I suppose we can look at some of the weather we're getting now, but all predicted through the climate crisis. But why haven't we catered for it? Why haven't we identified what's the exceptional circumstances of what are, and why aren't we bringing the water companies to challenge? Evidence from Professor Hammond indicated that water firms were responsible for 10 times more dumping than they were disclosing. And currently, there's a court case being taken on where the 6 water companies in the UK are being taken to court because they believe that they're underreporting the amount of sewage they dump into our rivers. And even the EA report says water companies are not reporting the total number of incidents. Self-reporting, they estimate, remains at 77%. You know, and if the EA, who was supposed to be actually monitoring and enforcing these laws, then 77% are self-reporting. There's a real question about where we are and what we're doing about it. But if we look at Safe Avon, what we're looking at is a citizen science project. We're looking at the Warwickshire Avon, and we're looking at the river from just above Stratford all the way down to Tewkesbury. And what we're seeing is an increasing number of spills year on year, and no accountability. In the Tewkesbury area, we're looking at 2 of the biggest pollution areas, one at Twinning where there's a sewage plant, and one in Tewkesbury at the Lower Load, where it's a pumping station, and both are actually pumping in, you know, hundreds and hundreds of hours of raw sewage. If I take Twinning, I mean, I can just give you a few figures here. That if we look at spills in 2021, 133 spills. But what does that tell us? So it spilled 133 times, but that spill lasted for 2,696 hours. So when we say one spill can be up to 12 hours. So you start to understand the problem when you start thinking about the hours it takes. A Lower Load pumping station in Tewkesbury, in 2020, 56 spills for 1,100 hours. In 21, 51 spills for 884 hours. In 2023, last year, 57 spills for over 1,000 hours of raw sewage dumped into our rivers. The sort of estimate we're working on is there was a paper produced by Oxford, and what it tells us is that if we're looking at what is clean and what is dirty water in relation to nitrogen and phosphate, which is what we're testing for, is that if we get phosphate of anything over 0.5 parts per million, the water is very highly polluted. Now we're looking on about 1,000 data sets that we've taken tests from our 63 testers on 50 sites on the Warwickshire Avon, and we're finding on phosphates, 99% of all tests are coming in at high or very high. And if we're looking at nitrates, anything over 2 parts per million is seen very high. And again, with nitrates on these testing sites and the data we're seeing, 97% is high or very high. I mean, looking at Tewkesbury, which is the area I'm covering, although I coordinate for the whole river, if we look at Twinning Fleet in relation to nitrates, the average over a year is 10.4 parts per million. And this is when I'm telling you that 2 parts per million is very, very high. You're seeing 10.4 parts per million. In a Lower Load, just by Tewkesbury, we're seeing 10 parts per million. So, and again, if we're looking at phosphates, Twinning Fleet, absolute classic, 9.6, 0.96, when 0.5 is very heavily polluted. But the issue with this is why and how do we get here, and how do we stop? Where do we move on to? I mean, in Cheltenham, you've got the same issue. I mean, as you can probably see on the slide, I've identified the bigger the brown spot is, the bigger the amount of sewage pollution in that river. And, you know, we can provide some data if people are interested in that. But Dowswell CSO, combined sewer overflow. So if we're looking at 2022, 139 spills for 2,511 hours directly into the Chelt. If we look at Hayden sewage works, 2021, 36 spills, 238 hours, or 2023, 42 spills for 426 hours. And this is into environments where, you know, we take our dogs, we can see kids swimming. I no longer let my dog go in the river. You know, he's a cocker and he'd love to, but I just don't think it's safe for him. So what can be done in the short term? Well, in the short term, we need to stop the spills of raw sewage, and we need to do that 100%. You know, it's not about, it's costly for the water companies to do that. It's about our health. We need to fix the leaks in the pipes and tanks at the sewage works. We need hugely increasing the holding capacity of ponds, because in inclement weather, the weather we're seeing now, this heavy rain, they need to be able to cope with this. They need to be holding it to treat it rather than just dump it into our rivers. We need to make sure that discharge monitors are all working as monitors, and the control gates are frequently broken and not working, and that's an issue. And we need to fully fund the Environment Agency to enforce current legislation in relation to farms and industrial pollution. The other part about it is we need to actually stop letting water companies have permits that allow them to dump raw sewage for millions of hours and say it's not pollution. In the longer term, we need to start looking at what Sweden, Norway, and America do. And they've started to treat their effluent with UV or ozone. And this is to kill bacteria, because time and time again, you know, we're not doing that, as well as the nitrates and phosphates, which actually affect the water environment, very much changing it from a low nutrient environment to a high nutrient, which will then stimulate invasive species. What we're seeing is bacteria and what have you dumped into these rivers, which will give us problems going into the future. Again, we need to fully fund the Environment Agency to enforce current legislation in relation to farms and industrial pollution. We need to make it unprofitable for water companies to pour sewage into our rivers. And for me, we're starting to see it. We saw it in the last election, or the one just gone. We need not to vote for people that don't care about our environment, yours and my environment, the environment our children work in, you know, the environment where we're in every day. If people don't care about the environment we live in, then I can't see that they can do a job for us in any political way, shape, or form. So, I mean, this is really just an overview. It's been quick. You know, I hope you find it interesting, but I hope you're aware of it, and I hope you ask the right political questions, not only local politics, but national politics. You know, why aren't we looking after one of the driving forces of all nature? Why aren't we taking the time and the effort to ensure that we've got clean water for ourselves, for our children and futures? Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Geoff. I wish I could say, well, I don't know what to say, to be honest. This is the second time I've heard your talk, and actually it doesn't make it easier the second time round. I'm sure it won't for people who are listening. I almost want to go back to something that you said and kind of reinforce it. It was the number of times raw sewage has been dumped into rivers and lakes across the country. And you mentioned the statistics from 2016 to 2023, and the rise is 570,000.
Yeah.
It's just beyond belief in
I mean,
that.
part of that, sorry, part of that, and an issue there is that we weren't counting it so much. Part of it is yeah, it's phenomenal the amount of raw sewage that's now being dumped, but I can't say it hasn't been dumped at the same rate, the same hourly sort of days and days of it for the last few years. It's just now we're asking the water companies to self-police and to actually tell us how many hours. But as I said, a professor who works on the Windrush WASP against sewage pollution is very much looking at it, and he reckons there's a gross underreporting over how much is being dumped. And today there's a court case going on where 6 water companies, and one of those is Severn Trent, our water company, are being taken to court because they believe they're underreporting, and they believe then in underreporting they're allowed to increase their profile and their star rating and increase their customer bills, and therefore they're being taken to court because they believe it's fraud. They're underreporting to actually be able to charge the customer more funds. Where do we go?
And we know that to take them to court costs money, and that money could be going to something else. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even the money, you see, this is people who care that are funding it. This and it's the court, it's our taxpayer. It's strange, isn't it? That us as individuals are funding a court case, that us as individuals through our taxes are going to defend in the one sense. I just, I don't know. I just wonder sometimes.
So you've mentioned it already, but I mean, we're sitting here and we're in different places, but it's pouring with rain, and it's been raining for quite some time now. And hopefully it'll stop tomorrow, but it'll probably start again in the next couple of days. What are you expecting to see at the end of this? How bad is it going to be?
Okay, I mean, if I take it just an overview first, is that we know the Victorian sewer system was designed to allow in really bad weather to bypass the sewage plants and to dump. We know that was it, but that was 100 years ago. But since 89, since it was privatized, we know that the water companies will tell you that as of 2021, they'd invested 60 billion in the system. But that's not just a sewage system, that's a water system, that's cars, that's offices, etc., etc. But over the same period, they've paid out 72 billion in dividends to shareholders, when close to 80% of those shareholders are outside the country. They're different organisations and financial groups that are just taking that dividend out while we suffer with the pollution. So it's sort of it's an ever worsening sort of circle. There's no what do they call it? What's the circle?
Virtuous circle.
Yeah, virtuous. There's no virtuous circle there unless you're somebody with water company shares and you're looking at getting a high return because the pollution doesn't bother you. Perhaps you're a Canadian pension company and getting high dividend returns and polluted English rivers just isn't really a problem for you. It's not something you've thought about much.
So you talked about some sort of short-term and kind of long-term actions. You're doing some work, obviously, in your area with Safe Haven. Do you feel that I know it's going to be only chipping away at it, but do you feel it is chipping away at it? Do you feel this data collection is helping to make the case?
Well, I think these citizen science projects, I think there's 2 things about it. One, it keeps the issue in the news. I think coming up to the last election, we saw a lot of it, and we saw a lot of national press about it. You know, there's a fear that it will fall off. You know, everything else will take priority, and the press will start reporting on it and whatever. But I think citizen science, taking that, keeping people that are doing this work weekly and keeping them informed and getting them to take it back out, and then talking to our MPs, writing to our MPs and saying, look, leading up to the election, you promised this. You know, I think that's what we need to do. I think that's the only way it's going to go on. We can't let it disappear. The other part about it is that, you know, I mean, some of my early academic work was in climate crisis and you know, the environment. And I think the climate crisis for all of us, while it's real and it's impacting on us, I think it's such a large beast to get a hold of. I think, you know, it's really difficult to, what can I do? And I think projects like Safe Haven, citizen science projects, and other environmental projects give some people a chance to get involved, a chance to do something. And I think mentally we need that. You know, we need to be doing something just to keep ourselves sane. You know, we can't be looking at our children and our children's children and think, you know, oh, I can't, it's all too big, I can't do something. We need something that helps us to come to terms, not only raising a profile, but managing it individually. It's always been my view that if you can give somebody something hands-on to do, they feel involved, and that will give them hope.
Absolutely. And so this really takes us back to what's happening in Cheltenham, because we have something called the Guardians of the River Chelt, and I think we met a couple of people at an event, our event a few weeks ago, and you know, their kind of subtext is we're cleaning up the River Chelt one bit at a time, and their focus is on litter picks and stopping the water, you know, killing wildlife and etc. But I think they want to do more water testing. And I think it's the kind of where you're kind of learning and what you know what good looks like, and you know the journey you've traveled. You can, you know, help groups like that and other groups around the country to kind of, you know, leapfrog some of the difficulties, you know, kind of what testing kit, what works best, where's the results. I mean, you know, I don't know if you have heard from them since then, but
we went out for a few hours, and I showed them through our testing kit. The testing kit we use is the same as on the Y and the Ask, and we've adopted it very much because it was developed by the Y Salmon and Fishing Association and Cardiff University, with the EA heavily involved, and therefore we feel that that's a great model, and we don't want to give the water companies. They're going to attack us and our data, and they downgrade citizen science. But, you know, if you look at Safe Haven, we've got over 1,200 data sets now, and therefore, you know, nobody can actually challenge that because of the amount. And we've been consistent in using this kit. And I went out with them and showed them the kit, and we talked through the kit, and they've gone away and they're giving it some thought. Is that the kit they want to use? I mean, part of them, they've come back and said it's really good, because would we continue to assist? And of course we would. You know, my view is as coordinating Safe Haven, it's about helping people to do this, but at the same time, you know, I've come to talk to you, I've talked to them, I've talked to a group in Gloucester. You know, we're looking not only the Avon, the Warwickshire Avon, but we started looking at the tributaries up on the Stour, because it feeds into the Avon. We're looking at the Carron, which is a small brook, but again, it comes through Washbourne, you know, Northway, through into Tewkesbury and then into the Avon. So, you know, not only do we want to clean up the Avon, we want to clean up all. We don't, you know, it's not just about do it for us and manage our little bit. You know, for the vast majority of us, it's about we shouldn't be here. So when do we call a stop? When do we say enough? And my view is, you know, people have been crying out for it for a while. we need to get more people involved. We need to actually get people more passionate about it. I genuinely believe something like this could be a single issue politics. It is for me. You know, if somebody stands up and says, "I'll do something about it," they've got more vote. You know, so.
Well, no, this is great, and thank you for supporting the Cheltenham, well, and Gloucester and others, because it's this best practice and that kind of uniformity across the data sets, as you say. You know, you look at one from Tewkesbury, you look at one from Cheltenham, one from Gloucester, and they all look, you know, it literally flows.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you. So yes, for anybody who's listening who wants to get involved, email become a guardian of the River Chelt is to email the River Chelt, all one word, at gmail.com. What I'd always like to just finish with, I spotted a note from the Gloucestershire Archives that in 1824, which was 200 years ago, it was highlighted that the Gas, Light and Coke Company of Cheltenham were polluting the river at Boddington. There were several letters exchanged, but it made no difference. And here we are 200 years later. Can we make a difference? So thank you again, Geoff.
Yeah, you just hope, haven't you? I mean, we've just got to have a hope. We've just got to, you know, go out there and stake a claim. You know, this is for our future. This is, you know, it's if we don't do it now, who will? And will they? So thank you.